The stage lights burned, 1,000 suns searing my skin. But I felt nothing. The crowd's roar was a distant hum, like static on a broken radio, as my fingers danced across the guitar strings. Mechanical, precise, empty. I was Ethan Cole, the rock star who'd sold out Madison Square Garden. But inside, I was a ghost, drifting through a life I no longer recognized. New York City, 2025. The air was thick with autumn rain, and I stood outside the venue, my breath visible in the chilly night. Fame had hollowed me out, years of chasing music. Love and meaning had left me numb, a shell of the boy who once dreamed under the stars in a small Ohio town. I lit a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly, and watched the city pulse around me. Then I saw him, across the street, under a flickering street lamp. A firefighter emerged from a station, his navy jacket emblazoned with FDNY. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that held a quiet storm. Something about him, maybe the way he moved, purposeful yet burden, made my chest tighten, a sensation I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know his name then, but his name was Caleb Reed, and he would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. The afterparty was a blur of champagne flutes and fake smiles, the kind of scene I'd grown to despise. I slipped out early, craving solitude, and found myself wandering the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. My guitar case bumped against my hip, a reminder of the music that used to mean everything. Now, it was just a prop, a mask for the world to adore. I stopped at a corner deli, the neon open sign buzzing faintly. Inside, the firefighter from earlier stood at the counter, ordering a coffee. Close. He was even more striking, early 30s, with short brown hair and a faint scar above his left eyebrow. His presence filled the small space, steady and warm, like a lighthouse in a storm. "You're Ethan Cole," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Not a question but a statement. I nodded, caught off guard. "And you're?" "Caleb. Just Caleb." He smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips that made my pulse stutter. We talked. It was simple at first, music, the city, the rain. But there was something in his eyes, a depth that pulled me in. He spoke about his work, about saving lives and losing sleep, and I found myself hanging on every word. For the first time in years, I felt the edges of something real, something alive. The next week, I saw Caleb again. I'd been invited to a charity event at a Brooklyn fire station. PR stunt my manager insisted on. I didn't expect him to be there, but when I spotted him polishing a fire truck, my heart did a strange flip. He looked up, caught my eye, and waved me over. "You play for real? Or is it all for show?" he teased, nodding at my guitar case. I smirked. "Want to find out?" We ended up in a quiet corner of the station, me strumming softly while he listened. The notes felt different that night, alive in a way they hadn't been in years. Caleb leaned back, his arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. When I finished, he clapped slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "Not bad for a rock star," he said. "Not bad for a firefighter who probably can't carry a tune." I shot back. He laughed, and the sound was warm, grounding. For a moment, I forgot the cameras, the expectations, The weight of my own name. It was just us. Two strangers finding something unspoken in the space between. But the world doesn't let you forget who you are. The tabloids caught wind of my visit to the station, spinning stories about Ethan Cole's new obsession. My manager, Rachel, was furious, warning me to keep my image clean. You're a heartthrob, Ethan. Don't complicate things. Complicate things. The word stung because I was already tangled up in thoughts of Caleb. I'd never been with a man before, never even considered it. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, felt the ghost of his hand brushing mine. It scared Menet because of what it meant, but because it was the first time in years I'd felt anything at all. I started finding excuses to see him. A coffee run at the deli. A casual walk past the fire station. Each encounter chipped away at the numbness, replacing it with a warmth I didn't understand. Caleb was steady, real, the opposite of the chaos that defined my life. He didn't care about my fame, my money, or my music. He saw me, and that was both thrilling and terrifying. One night, after a long rehearsal, I found myself at the station again. Caleb was on night shift, sitting alone in the break room with a book. He looked up when I walked in, surprise softening into a smile. Couldn't stay away. He said, closing the book. Guess not. I admitted, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. We talked until dawn, about everything and nothing, his childhood in Brooklyn, my dreams of escaping Ohio, the way the city could feel like both a home and a cage. As the first light crept through the window, our knees touched under the table, and neither of us pulled away. The tension between us grew, a tightrope we were both afraid to cross. I was a public figure, every move scrutinized. Caleb had his own battles. Rumors about his sexuality had already cost him friends at the station. But the pull was undeniable, like a melody I couldn't stop humming. One evening, after a sold-out show, I invited him to my apartment in Soho. It was a risk, but I didn't care. The city sparkled outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, but all I saw was him, sitting on my couch, his firefighter jacket draped over the armrest. You ever get tired of it? He asked, his voice soft. The fame, the noise. Every day, I said, surprised by my own honesty. But it's all I know. He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt exposed, like he could see the cracks in my carefully crafted facade. You don't have to be what they want, Ethan, he said. You can just be. Those words broke something in me, something I'd buried under years of performances and pretense. I leaned closer, my heart pounding, and for the first time in forever, I wanted to feel everything. Our faces were inches apart, the air between us electric. I could smell the faint cedar of Caleb's cologne, see the flicker of uncertainty in his blue eyes. Then, without thinking, I closed the distance, my lips brushing his in a kiss that felt like waking up. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a spark, a flame igniting the parts of me I'd thought were dead. Caleb's hand found the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this: his warmth, his breath, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. When we pulled apart, his eyes searched mine, a mix of wonder and fear. Ethan, he whispered, this is complicated. I know, I said, my voice raw. But I don't care. That night, we didn't talk about the consequences. We didn't talk about my fame or his job or the world waiting to tear us apart. We just held onto each other. Two lost souls finding anchor in a storm. The next morning, reality crashed in. My phone buzzed with notifications. Paparazzi had caught me leaving the fire station late at night. And the headlines were vicious. Ethan Cole's secret rendezvous. Screamed one. Rock star's shocking new flame. Taunted another. My manager, Rachel, called. Her voice sharp with panic. Ethan, what the hell are you doing? This could ruin you. I sat on the edge of my bed. Caleb still asleep beside me. His face peaceful in a way that made my chest ache. Ruin me. I was already ruined. Hollowed out by a life that demanded perfection while giving nothing back. But Caleb was different. He was real. I didn't respond to Rachel. Instead, I turned off my phone and lay back down, watching the rise and fall of Caleb's chest. For the first time, I didn't feel like running. We tried to keep things quiet, meeting in secret at his small Brooklyn apartment or tucked away corners of the city. Every stolen moment felt like a rebellion, a middle finger to the world that wanted to define us. Caleb told me about his life growing up with a single mom, joining the FDNY to make her proud. The quiet prejudice he faced when rumors about his sexuality started to spread. I've lost people, he admitted one night, his voice low as we sat on his fire escape. The city sprawling below us. Guys at the station, they look at me differently now. I reached for his hand, my fingers intertwining with his. I'm sorry, I said, hating how inadequate it sounded. He shook his head. Don't be. I'd rather be me than pretend to be someone I'm not. His words hit hard. I spent years pretending, shaping myself into the rock star the world wanted. But with Caleb, I didn't have to perform. I could just be Ethan, the guy who loved music and bad coffee, and the way Caleb's laugh made everything brighter. But secrets don't stay secret in a city like New York. A grainy photo of us holding hands outside a diner went viral. And suddenly, my life was a circus. Fans were divided, some cheered. Others sent hate mail. My record label pressured me to clarify my relationship, to spin it as a publicity stunt. Rachel begged me to deny it, to protect my brand. I refused. I'm not ashamed, I told her, my voice steady. I'm done hiding. The fallout was brutal. Shows were canceled. Endorsements dropped. My social media was a war zone of support and vitriol. But through it all, Caleb was there. His presence a quiet strength. He didn't care about the headlines or the cameras. He cared about me. One night, after a particularly vicious article, he pulled me into his arms. You don't have to fight this alone, he said, his voice firm. We're in this together. I buried my face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. Together. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until now. The pressure didn't let up. My label threatened to drop me unless I fixed my image. Caleb faced his own battles. His captain called him in, questioning his distractions. We were fighting a war on two fronts, and I started to wonder if love was worth the cost. But then I'd see Caleb smile, hear his laugh, feel his hand in mine, and I knew I couldn't let go. Not now. Not ever. He was the music I'd been searching for, the melody that brought me back to life. One evening, as we walked through Central Park, the leaves crunching under our feet, I stopped and turned to him. "I don't know how this ends," I said, my voice trembling, "but I know I want you in it." He looked at me, his eyes soft but fierce. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, "one step at a time." The world kept spinning, but our steps felt heavier. Caleb's words in Central Park lingered. A promise we both wanted to keep but weren't sure we could. The city, once a backdrop to our stolen moments, now felt like a battlefield, every corner hiding a camera or a critic ready to tear us apart. I threw myself into my music, hoping it would ground me. Late nights in the studio, I poured everything into new songs raw, honest tracks about love, loss, and finding yourself in someone else. My producer, Sam, listened to the demos and shook his head. "These are good, Ethan. Too good. But they're gonna scare the label." "Let them be scared," I said, defiance burning in my chest. "This is who I am." Sam sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Just be careful. You're playing with fire." He wasn't wrong. The label was already on edge, and the media frenzy showed no signs of slowing. But every time I faltered, I thought of Caleb, his steady hands, his quiet courage, and I kept going. Caleb invited me to meet his mom, Maria, a small but fierce woman who'd raised him alone in a cramped Brooklyn apartment. We sat at her kitchen table, the smell of homemade empanadas filling the air. She studied me with sharp eyes, like she could see right through the rock star facade. "You make my boy happy," she said finally, her voice thick with a Puerto Rican accent. "But this life you live, it's not easy. You ready for that?" I glanced at Caleb, who was watching me with a mix of pride and worry. "I'm trying to be," I said honestly. She nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Good. He's worth it." That night, as we lay in Caleb's childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded posters and old trophies, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. "Your mom's amazing," I whispered. "She's a force," he said, his arm draped over my waist. "Like you." I laughed softly, but the weight of his words settled deep. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for us. The next blow came fast. A major talk show invited me to perform, a chance to reclaim my narrative. But the catch was clear. They wanted the old Ethan Cole, the safe, straight heartthrob. No mention of Caleb, no hint of the truth. I almost said yes. The temptation to slip back into that familiar role was strong security, stability, the life I'd known. But as I sat in my dressing room, staring at the contract, Caleb's face flashed in my mind. I tore it up. Instead, I wrote a new song, "Spark in the Dark," and performed it unplugged at a small club in the East Village. The crowd was small, intimate, nothing like the arenas I was used to. I sang about finding light in the chaos, about a kiss that changed everything. Caleb was there, in the back, his eyes locked on mine. When I finished, the room erupted, and for the first time, I felt like my music was mine again. But freedom came at a cost. The label dropped me the next day, citing irreconcilable differences. My streams plummeted as algorithms buried my new work. Fans who'd once worshipped me turned away, their loyalty as fleeting as the headlines. Caleb faced his own reckoning. A coworker at the station outed him publicly, posting a photo of us online with a vicious caption. The backlash was immediate slurs scrawled on his locker. Cold shoulders from men he'd once called brothers. He didn't tell me at first, but I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed when he thought I wasn't looking. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked one night, my voice breaking as we sat on his couch. He shrugged, his jaw tight. "Didn't want to worry you. You've got enough on your plate." "That's not how this works," I said, grabbing his hand. "We carry this together. Remember?" He looked at me, his eyes softening. "I'm not used to that." "Then get used to it," I said, pulling him close. "I'm not going anywhere." The weeks that followed were a test of everything we were. My career was in freefall, but I refused to back down. I booked gigs at smaller venues, places where the crowd didn't care about my image, only my music. Each performance felt like a reclamation, a step toward the person I wanted to be. Caleb, though, was struggling. The fire station, once his sanctuary, had become a minefield. He'd always been the guy who ran into burning buildings without hesitation. But now he hesitated before walking into the break room. I hated seeing him like that, his light dimmed by cruelty. One night, after a particularly rough shift, he showed up at my apartment, his eyes red-rimmed. "I got suspended," he said, his voice hollow. "They said I was a distraction, said I needed to sort myself out." I pulled him inside, my heart breaking. "This is bullshit," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You're the best damn firefighter they've got." He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not cut out for this anymore." I knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You are Caleb Reed. You save lives. You saved me. Don't let them take that from you." He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought he might break. But then he leaned forward, kissing me with a desperation that mirrored my own. It wasn't just love, it was defiance, a refusal to let the world win. We started fighting back in our own ways. I poured my anger into my music, writing songs that called out the hypocrisy, the hate, the systems that tried to break us. I posted them online, raw and unfiltered, and slowly, a new audience found me, people who saw themselves in my words, who understood what it meant to fight for who you are. Caleb, meanwhile, filed a formal complaint against the station. It was a risk, but he was done hiding. His mom rallied behind him, organizing a small protest outside the station with other firefighters' families. I stood beside her, holding a sign that read, "Love is not a distraction." The crowd was small, but their voices were loud. And for the first time, Caleb looked like he believed he could win. Then came the fire. It was a cold November night, and I was in the middle of a set at a dive bar in Queens when my phone buzzed with a news alert. A warehouse blaze in Brooklyn. Out of control. Caleb's station was on the scene. I don't remember leaving the stage. I grabbed my jacket and ran, hailing a cab to the site. When I got there, the scene was chaos, flames licking the sky, smoke choking the air. I spotted Caleb's captain and grabbed his arm. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice raw. The captain's face was grim. "He's inside. They're trapped." My world stopped. I stood there, frozen, as the fire roared, each second stretching into eternity. I spent years numb, but now every nerve was alive with fear, with love, with the desperate need to see him again. The fire was a monster, devouring everything in its path. I stood at the edge of the cordoned-off area, my heart hammering as I scanned the chaos for any sign of Caleb. The crowd around me whispered, their voices a mix of fear and awe, but all I could hear was the roar of the flames and the scream of sirens. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, through the smoke, I saw him stumbling out of the warehouse, carrying an unconscious woman in his arms. His face was smudged with soot, his jacket torn, but he was alive. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouts of police, and ran to him. "Caleb." My voice broke as I reached him. He handed the woman to a paramedic, then turned to me, his eyes wide with exhaustion and relief. "Ethan," he rasped, pulling me into a hug that smelled of smoke and sweat. "I'm okay." I held him tight, my hands shaking. "Don't ever scare me like that again," I whispered. He laughed weakly, his breath warm against my neck. "No promises." The fire made headlines, and so did Caleb. The woman he'd saved was a single mom, and her tearful gratitude on the news painted him as a hero. For a moment, the narrative shifted. People saw the man I loved, not the rumors or the hate. His suspension was lifted, and the station issued a public apology, though it felt hollow to both of us. But the fire changed something in me too. I spent years chasing fame, thinking it would fill the void inside me. But standing there, watching Caleb risk everything for a stranger, I realized what mattered. It wasn't the stage or the spotlight. It was him. I wrote a new song that night, "Through the Smoke," about love that burns brighter than any fire. I performed it at a small benefit concert for the fire victims, with Caleb in the front row. When I sang the final note, the crowd was on its feet, and Caleb's eyes were shining with something I hadn't seen before: hope. We started rebuilding, piece by piece. My music found a new home with an indie label that didn't care about my personal life, only my art. The gigs were smaller, the paychecks leaner, but the crowds were real, their cheers unfiltered. I was no longer the untouchable rock star, and I was okay with that. Caleb returned to work, but the scars remained. Some of his colleagues welcomed him back. Others kept their distance. He didn't let it break him. Instead, he started mentoring younger firefighters, sharing his story to help them navigate their own struggles. One night, as we sat on his fire escape, the city glittering below, he turned to me. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "All the time," I said, leaning against him. "But as long as you're here, I'm good." He smiled, his hand finding mine. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." Together became our mantra, a quiet vow that carried us through the noise. The world hadn't stopped judging, but we'd learned to tune it out. My music was rawer now, stripped of the polish that had once defined me. Fans who stuck around called it my best work yet. And for the first time, I believed them. Caleb and I found a rhythm, balancing his shifts with my gigs. We'd meet at the deli for late-night coffee or steal afternoons in Central Park, our hands brushing as we walked. The city, once a cage, started to feel like home again. But the past has a way of creeping back. One evening, an old friend from Ohio reached out to me, the guy I'd grown up dreaming with, back when music was our only escape. He was in town, wanted to catch up. I hesitated, but Caleb encouraged me. "You can't run from who you were," he said. "Go. I'll be here." Tommy was the same as I remembered, lanky, with a crooked grin and a laugh that filled the room. We met at a dive bar, swapping stories over cheap beer. But when I mentioned Caleb, his smile faltered. "You're serious about this guy?" he asked, his tone sharp. "I mean, come on, Ethan. You're not, you know." The words hit like a punch. I faced hate online, from strangers, but hearing it from someone I'd once trusted cut deeper. "I am," I said, my voice steady. "And if you can't handle that, we're done here." I walked out, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. When I got back to Caleb's apartment, he took one look at me and pulled me into his arms. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." He kissed my forehead, his touch grounding me. "You don't have to lose yourself to love me," he said softly. "You're enough." That night, I wrote another song, Roots and Wings, about the people who lift you up and the ones you have to let go. I performed it at a small festival, dedicating it to Caleb without saying his name. He was in the crowd, his smile brighter than the stage lights. Our life wasn't perfect. The tabloids still circled, and Caleb's coworkers weren't all on board. But we had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. The seasons changed, and so did we. Winter settled over New York, blanketing the city in snow. Caleb and I spent Christmas with his mom, her tiny apartment filled with laughter and the smell of roasted pork. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But the world kept testing us. A major music award show invited me to perform, a chance to step back into the spotlight. The catch: they wanted me to tone down my personal narrative. I refused, choosing instead to perform Spark in the Dark with a full band, the stage lit with rainbow lights. The performance went viral. Some called it brave. Others called it reckless. But the messages that flooded my inbox from kids who felt seen, from parents who wanted to understand, made it worth it. I wasn't just singing for myself anymore. I was singing for them. Caleb's fight at the station took a turn. A new captain, more open-minded, took over, and Caleb was promoted to lieutenant. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was progress. He came home one night, his new badge pinned to his uniform, and I tackled him with a hug. "You did it," I said, grinning. "We did it," he corrected, kissing me softly. That night, we talked about the future, something we'd avoided for so long. Marriage, a house, maybe even a dog. Felt big, scary, but right. Spring arrived, and with it, a sense of renewal. My new album, Alive Again, dropped to critical acclaim, not for its polish but for its heart. The tour was small, just me and a guitar in intimate venues, but every note felt like a victory. Caleb came to as many shows as he could, standing in the back with that quiet pride that made my heart soar. One night, after a show in Boston, I pulled him onto the tour bus. The city lights blurred outside as I took his hand. "I was lost before you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You brought me back." He smiled, his eyes soft. "You were never lost, Ethan. You just needed someone to see you." Kissed him then, under the dim glow of the bus's fairy lights, and it felt like the first time all over again. The world could judge, could hate, could try to break us, but we'd built something strong-era love that burned through the noise, the fear, the fire. Years later, we stood in a small garden in Brooklyn, surrounded by family and friends. I wore a simple suit, Caleb in his dress blues. Maria sobbed happily as we exchanged vows, promising to fight for each other, to love through every storm. My music never returned to the heights of my rock star days, but it didn't need to. I had Caleb, our dog Max, and a life that felt full. The numbness was gone, replaced by a warmth that grew with every touch, every laugh, every quiet moment we shared. As we danced under the stars, I realized the truth. Caleb's kiss hadn't just brought my soul back. It had shown me it was never gone, just waiting for the right person to set it free.